friendship is over. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Invasive Procedures, which is episode 4 of season 2 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the second season episode, Invasive Procedures. So Invasive Procedures is the episode in which the station's evacuated for a plasma storm, and when they try to help a ship who's in trouble with the plasma storm, they turn out to be a group of mercenaries who take over the station, hold the crew captive, led by a Trill who wants to steal Jadzia's symbiont. So at phaser point, he forces Bashir to do the operation and put the symbiont inside of him, and he becomes Gerard Dax, and Sisko tries to manipulate Dax to get him to put the symbiont back to Jadzia, but he refuses to do so, and so Sisko tries to manipulate his girlfriend to turn on him, and meanwhile Quark comes up with the scheme in order to free Bashir and Odo, and then Odo, with the help of Odo and Kira, they manage to overpower the mercenaries, and Sisko gets aid from Varad's girlfriend, who gives him a phaser, and he uses the phaser to shoot Varad, even though it puts the symbiont at risk. But it pays off because they're able to put the symbiont back in Jadzia, and everything is returned. So I always liked this episode. To me, this is always one of my favorites when it first came out. Quite enjoyed it. Used to watch it a lot. It's funny because as I normally do, I read a lot of reviews and watched a lot of reviews on the episode, and opinion on this seems to be incredibly mixed. Like I mentioned how I like this episode. I know my sister didn't care for this episode all that much, if I remember correctly. And from the reviews I watched, went from one of the review absolutely hated this episode and thought it was one of the worst of the show. Another loved it and thought it was one of the best of the show. Another one was really indifferent to it. And then I went to IMDb and their user ratings, and it was all over the place, from 10s to 7s, mostly 7, but there's a 10, there was a 9, there was a 2, there was a 3. It seems to me like this is a very polarizing episode that people can't really agree on whether or not this is a good episode or not. So I know I'm going to have a lot of people disagreeing with me. And I haven't read the Patreon comments yet, so I wonder if they will reflect this and also have varying degrees of good to bad. But anywho, this episode features John Glover playing Varad Dax, or he becomes Varad Dax briefly. It's just Varad, whom I recognize instantly as from the movie Gremlins 2, which he played Daniel Clamp. Obviously, it's supposed to be a play on Donald Trump, but this was back in the early 90s, so he was like this, real estate billionaire who was like a dick to all his employees. And it's actually a good movie. I went and watched it last year, and I was like, yeah, surprising how well it holds up, particularly its satire on how big corporations treat their workers like shit, which is really relevant today with Amazon and all that. So it's had some childish jokes in it. But anyway, recognize him instantly for that. He was also in the movie Scrooged, but I kind of forgot about that one. I watched that one for Christmas. Was it last year or the year before? It was the year before. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, he's in this one too. Kind of forgot about that. And I'm sure I've seen him in other stuff too. Like he was in Batman Forever and I don't know, some other shit. But when this episode first came out, I recognized instantly as Daniel Clamp. And I remember I talked before about this article in the TV Guide that I read before season 2 started. and it was talking about all these great guest stars that we're gonna have. We're gonna have Frank Langella and John Glover and Louise Fletcher's coming back, and that one dude who played Lead Nihilus that was apparently West Side Story, who I never fucking heard of. And I think they even mentioned Steven Weber. And I was like, oh, wow, I never heard of any of these fucking people. I don't know who they are. So I was like, why are you presenting it? Like, look at all these great actors we got. And I've never heard of a single one. However, I didn't know them by name, but as soon as I saw them, like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who played the asshole Secretary of State in Dave. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who was in Gremlins 2. He played Daniel Clamp. I had never seen West Side Story, though, so I didn't give a fuck about Lee Nihilus guy, but I did recognize those two. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is where they're from. So yeah, I think he's actually a really good actor, and that's part of the reason why I like this episode a lot. I think he does a really good job in this role. He's a memorable villain, I think, and quite a good one. He definitely does a good job the way he switches from Varad without the symbiont and then Varad with the symbiont. Like, he plays it very distinctly different. It's just a really good job, I think. And then there's the actress who plays his girlfriend. She was I think I've seen her in other stuff, but the only one coming to me off the top of my head was she was also in a later D Space Nine episode, Little Green Men, where she played I think it was a nurse or something that was back in the 40s with Quark and Odo. I'm sure, I don't know, I could have sworn I've seen her in other things. But yeah, and of course Tim Russ is in it. It's his second appearance in Star Trek before he would become Tuvok. He does a pretty good Klingon, actually. It's weird though seeing him as a Klingon in this episode, because it's like, it's Tuvok being a Klingon. It's like weird. But he actually does a good job at it. So the guest cast was really good, particularly John Glover. He did a really good job. I think it was a pretty intense episode. I think the suspense was high. And the moment, like the whole, I think it was an interesting plot too, with him trying to steal a symbiont. They're getting more into the Trill, and you have that scene. One of my favorite scenes of the episode is when Jadzia has the symbiont taken away and she wakes up and she's really upset, and Julian is like, I won't let you die. Like, that actually brings a tear to my eye, almost, really. That was a really powerful scene for both Terry Farrell and Alexander Siddig, and I think this is really the first time where Jadzia and Julian's relationship is getting, like, really strong. Julian's definitely getting away from that annoying, arrogant little shit that he was in season 1 and becoming a likable character. And they're also getting away from him just crushing on Jadzia hard out and having more of a stronger platonic relationship. And just the way that Jadzia, like, relies on him. And I like she pretty much has to tell him, like, to just do what Varad says, because Julian at first is like, I outright refuse to do it, like, under no circumstances. And then, Varad shoots O'Brien, and then Sisko later is like, do what he says, Doctor. So, so I think Bashir, you can see now that they're really starting to improve his character. And, Terry Farrell even said that this is one of her favorite episodes that she was in. She said, when asked which guest actor she really liked working with the most, she said John Glover. And this episode said he was a great, fantastic actor, and he said, apparently he told her that he really enjoyed working with her, and she was so flattered, apparently. And, also Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Hewitt Wolf, who wrote the episode, and Michael Piller, who is still technically the showrunner of DS9 at this stage. They all cited this episode as one of their favorites of season 2. So I guess you see where they land on the... I can see why, actually, because it's really good guest stars and it's an engaging plot that I think is pretty strong. And it's I was thinking comparing this to the episode Power Play because it also involves a hostage situation, and I think this one's only like a billion times better. Personally, just me, I think it's way more interesting. Power Play, it was kind of suspenseful, but to me it had no substance. It was kind of empty. It's kind of just like weird aliens taking over the body and pretending to be ghosts or whatever. Like, I didn't really care about that. But here, they get into Varad's motivation and they give you exposition and backstory in the Trill. This is the first time we learn that it's rare for the Trill to join with the symbiont, and how it's very difficult, and they have a very rigorous selection process, which we will learn in a future episode is actually bullshit, and they just do that because there's not enough symbionts to go around. But still, and we'll touch on it again later on in season 2 as well with the episode Playing God, which I did not care for very much, but we'll get to that episode when we get to it. And I probably based that story idea for that episode off of this one, because it's really establishing the whole thing with the Trill. So, but the point is that you really got into his motivation. You could see that he felt like he was gypped in life, that he had his full potential was stolen from him, and so he's going to steal it from Jadzia. It's a dumb joke, but really, yeah. But you could get in his mindset, and then the interactions with the characters, with like Jadzia, like willing to sacrifice herself, and Cisco vowing to not let her die, and the way that Cisco plays mind games with Mariel, I believe her name is, and also Bashir and his devotion, saying I'm not gonna let you die. Like, that's powerful. So to me, there's a lot of the motivation of the villain was great. You'd like get a sense of the villains, and the stakes of the characters being held hostage and O'Brien being shot. Like, this felt more real, more intense, more engaging than something like Power Play, or even like something like Starship Mine, which that also had hostages in it too, and that's more just like a dumb fun action, where here I was like emotionally invested. And it's so, I like this episode better than both of those. And any other, like, these action type episodes. Now, I mentioned that they shot O'Brien, because, of course, they did. This is, we're going to start getting into the whole O'Brien must suffer thing. And you could say this is an early example of it, but it's not. The whole episode's not about it. But, I mean, I love the episode Whispers, which I did already cover, which arguably is an O'Brien Must Suffer episode. But other than that, I typically don't like the O'Brien Must Suffer episodes. I don't really care for Hard Time. Don't like Tribunal. I can't remember any of the... Armageddon Game was very forgettable. But I'm sure there might be one that I think is okay. But I just don't like the trope in general. I think... The fact that it became a trope that fans gave a name to is dumb. They shouldn't have done it that much. They talked about how O'Brien was the everyman, and so they wanted to... He's relatable to the audience, so that's usually why they made him suffer, because the audience could relate to it more. But no, if you do it too much, it becomes a trope. Just like being trapped in the holodeck when the safety turned off. Although, personally, I don't think they should do that at all, because why the fuck is good as safeties if a fucking entertainment machine can kill you? But that's another subject altogether. Point is, I always have to pick on poor Miles. And this episode in particular, first, like, when Bashir says, I'll have no part in this, Varad's like, I understand, and shoots someone. Of course, chooses O'Brien, doesn't choose Sisko, doesn't choose Kira, chooses O'Brien to shoot. And he goes down. He's got this phaser wound, and so Bashir sort of, treats it before he goes down to the infirmary. And then later, when Sisko's just talking with Kira and O'Brien, the Tim Russ, the Tuvok Klingon, comes over and goes, no talking. And what does he do? Kicks O'Brien in his wound. For those of you who've seen the show Lower Decks, this reminded me of, believe it was in season 4, there was an episode where Mariner and, the Vulcan, they're escaping her name. Name's escaping me at the moment. But Mariner, the Vulcan, and Tendi go to Orion. And they do this running gag where, Tendi keeps coming up with these scary Orions and everything. But the running gag is Mariner keeps getting stabbed in the same shoulder, like the same spot, like over and over again. People just keep hitting her shoulder. Like when Tendi's sister throws a knife at Tendi, she ducks and it hits Mariner in the exact same spot, and eventually she's like, oh, come on. And I was thinking, that's what they're doing with O'Brien. It's kind of what they're doing with O'Brien here. It's like, oh, we got to shoot someone. O'Brien, of course, in the shoulder. Oh, we got to make someone else there, so let's kick him in the shoulder. It's like, I don't know. It was just twice, to be fair, but it still felt like they were just particularly picking on O'Brien in this episode. He has to be the one to suffer. One thing I thought was interesting, though, is the whole thing with, and apparently they had enough intel on the station where they knew about Odo, and they had that little box, and they held O'Brien at gunpoint and said, get in the box, otherwise I'm going to shoot O'Brien. It's kind of convenient for them that Odo happened to be there at the airlock when they first got there, because what if Odo wasn't there? And so he would hide in the shape-shifting thing. I suppose they could, make a, call over the speaker and the whole station, be like, oh, we have these people hostage, we're going to kill one of them until you come out. They could have done Die Hard with Odo. But I guess that's not what they wanted to do with this episode. And plus, we have Starship Mine. We don't need another Die Hard episode. But, it does make me wonder what they would have done with Odo if he hadn't conveniently been there so that they could threaten O'Brien and say, get in this box now. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose they could have called him on the speaker, but Odo could have figured out some shape-shifting way to stop him before they could kill anyone, because he's awesome. He's Odo. Anyway, the whole thing with him being in the box, that was cool. That was part of the intenseness of it, especially when Tuvok Klingon went to an infirmary, Bashir's went to Bashir and said, put this in your stasis chamber. Do it now, I'll destroy it. And Bashir's confused, what is that supposed to be, some kind of threat? You brought a box with you and you're threatening to destroy it? Why would I care? But O'Brien's they got Odo in there. He's like, oh, okay. Well, then again. And then, of course, when Quark manages to overpower the Klingon, that they does the whole thing with picking the lock, because of course Quark can pick locks because apparently he can do anything that's illegal. Well, apparently, I guess. The way he talks is sophisticated, but vulnerable if you know where to look. Is he a professional lock picker now? Does he just know every single skill that outlaws have? I don't know. Anyway, although I did get, because he was listening to it with Ferengi ears, and I do know Ferengis have very, intense, very excellent hearing, so maybe that could have something to do with it, but I don't know. Anyway, it's not that big of a deal either way. But speaking of Quark, Armin Sherman, I talked about all the people who liked this episode. Armin Sherman didn't like this episode that much because he didn't like what they did with his character. Because Quark let these mercenaries come on the station who took over the station and who shot O'Brien and nearly killed that Jadzia, and he faced no consequences for it. And so he didn't like what they did with his character, that he shouldn't be stooped that low, and also the fact that he faced no consequences for his actions. Now, I talked about this in Season 1 because there were 2 examples of episodes where the Armin Shimon also believed they took his character too far, and I also agree with that. There was The Passenger, where he hired all these mercenaries that slaughtered these people on his ship. Quark put them there. He's the one that paid them and arranged for them to go raid that ship and murder a whole bunch of people. And then the episode Vortex, where Quark was selling this item and he purposely hired this guy to rob these other people of the item for him so he didn't have to pay for it, and the robbery went wrong and one of them got killed. And he again faced no consequences for this. And so, I mean, the running thing with Quark is supposed to be that he's mostly into petty criminal. He's mostly like a middleman, and it actually benefits Odo by keeping him there, not arresting him, so that he can use Quark to get to the bigger fish. But when Quark's doing shit like that, it seems like Odo's kind of bad at his job for just letting him still stick around. But I will say, if memory serves me correctly, this will be the last example that he does something really, really bad. I mean, up until Season 5 when he sells weapons, but then the crew actually addressed the fact, and they actually do ostracize him for doing that, and they all address the fact that he's doing something terrible, whereas in these 3 episodes, they just say, oh, you crazy guy, you got a bunch of people killed, and you almost killed Jadzia, and you had us all help the people hold us all hostage and shoot O'Brien in the shoulder. Oh, don't do it again. Now, I do have some headcanon, though, on why they were a little lenient on Quark. Is that I think that the fact that he helped them get out of the situation, it was actually kind of, in a way, it was Quark who saved the day, because he's the one who attacked the Timorous Klingon, got attacked, went to sickbay, faked an injury, and faked his screaming, going, and allowed Bashir to disable the Klingon, which then got Odo out, and he's the one that opened the lock in order to get Odo out. And Odo's the one who, because he was freed by Quark, he was able to get to the ship before Varad did and unleash the docking clamp, and then both Odo and Kira stopped the Klingon and beat him up, so that when Varad tried to go to the other runabout, Sisko only had Varad to deal with, and also had that ship been there, he wouldn't have gone to the other runabout, he would have gotten away. So yeah, a strong argument could be made that Quark saved the day, and I think that's no minor thing. Now, does that mean he should face no consequences for allowing these people to take over the station? No, but it should definitely make a difference. But on top of that, let's throw on top of that the fact that I don't think Quark knew that these Klingons or these mercenaries were going to take over the station. They make it very clear that he didn't know that they were going to try to steal Dax's symbiont. Like, he clearly had no idea about that. I do believe, had he known, he would never agree to it. And also because he was talking about selling Yeto these, I don't even know what the fuck he was selling him. He was selling him something, but that's what he thought it was about. And he was like, it was like, stupid Ferengi, and pulled a disruptor on him. And Quark had no idea he was going to do that. So I think that Quark had no idea they were going to take over the station. I think he thought they were just going to come on board and do this illegal deal on the station and no one's around. But I do have a problem with the scene where Yeto goes to Quark and it's like, you think you're so clever, but you're stupid! And Quark's just like, oh, now, Yeto, you actually believe that you came all this way, braved the storm, just to tell me to keep my merchandise? And he pulls the disruptor. He's like, stupid Ferengi. Why didn't Quark know he was going to do that? Like, if Quark, and it does seem like Quark, as we know, has regular dealings with the Black Mark and shady characters all the time, why doesn't he have a contingency to make it sure that someone doesn't do exactly this, especially in a situation like this where there's no one on the station except for a skeleton crew? Why doesn't he have, he should have, some sort of backup so that when he goes, stupid Ferengi, he, presses a button that disables a disruptor or something. Or what else could he do? He could have, some sort of backup, maybe press a button and a dart flies out of the wall and, hits him and knocks him out or something, booby trap the shit. I don't know, maybe that's too high-tech, but I don't know, it seems like Quark should... I just don't buy that he would have no protection. Plus, I don't buy that he would be that stupid to not realize when he says, I don't want it, that he's simply going to pull a fucking phaser on you and take it by force. I mean, that's fucking obvious. The whole 24 trope. Got your payment right here. Which I fucking hate that trope. But anyway... so that thing did annoy me a little bit, but you know what didn't annoy me? Avery Brooks is overacting. I love Avery Brooks. I think Sisko is definitely the best part of this episode. I fucking love. That's really what makes me get up and cheer, and think is so amazing. I love the scenes with Sisko trying to manipulate. What's her name? Muriel. Yeah. Trying to manipulate her, and just the way that he sort of plays with her. It's like, oh, maybe he was just a slip of the tongue. It's so good. And then when he's talking to Varad and does that whole thing of, oh, you're all friends. It's really, masterful the way he tries to manipulate. It's like, oh, do you remember that time when we did all these drinks? And they were like, oh, yeah, having a laugh. And then he's like, how about the time we discovered the wormhole? And he stops immediately. And Sisko's like, my. He's like, that's Jadzia's proudest moment. It's like, and that woman's dying in the infirmary right now. That was... so good. He was so playing mind games with him, and I fucking love that. It was so good. And of course, when Varad still refused to do it, Sisko does the whole thing, and he just knocks him away. It's like, our friendship is over, which is so damn good. One of my favorite parts, by easily, of the episode is when he goes to Varad and with the phaser when Varad's trying to leave, and Varad's just like, you're not going to shoot me, Benjamin, because even at stun you could risk the life of the symbiont. Nothing's more important than the symbiont. And he's like, goodbye, Benjamin. And Sisko's like, Varad. He turns around, don't call me Benjamin, and then shoots him. Fucking awesome. I think I forgot to put this in my top 10 one-liners. This is actually should be on that list. This is one of the best one-liners. It's better than the whole Starship Mine one. I think I just forgot about this. Or maybe I didn't forget about it. I'll have to watch that video again. But this is such a good line. Such an amazing one-liner. Don't call me Benjamin. And it shoots him. Now, one of the complaints I heard about this episode is that it's unrealistic that Dax, the symbiont, once joined with Varad, wouldn't be like, yeah, no, Jadzia's dying, I need to go save her. And I don't know, I definitely see where people are coming from. with that one. I think it is a valid point. But I'm actually willing to let it go. Again, I'll headcanon this away. My headcanon for this is that when a symbiont and a host join, it's like they become a new person. It's like a joining that aspects of the symbiont's personality and aspects of the host's personality join together. And it seems to me, while the host obviously is 100% no, we have to keep the symbiont, and I think that because they become one person, it's not like there's a symbiont and a host inside the head talking to each other. They become a new person, like they join, their personalities join together and become someone else. So I feel like the aspects of Rod that desperately want the symbiont is kind of self-deluded, the Dax part of him. Because, as I said, it's one person. It's not like two things talking to each other. But I think subconsciously that aspect of him, like, talked the symbiont aspect of him into believing that if they gave the symbiont back to Jadzia, then it might die. That's my headcanon, is that the host aspect of him convinced the symbiont aspect of, if we put that back, then I might die. And we can't let that happen. We can't risk it happening. So I think it was sort of self-delusional. But it is interesting, though, because the Dax symbiont's part of Jadzia, and then it being okay with Jadzia dying, and now that it's in someone else, I can see why people have an issue with it. And then the symbiont goes back into Jadzia, and then she has memories from being in Varad. And so, I mean, yeah, I'm definitely saying that complaint is valid, but I personally, it doesn't bother me, really. I think my headcanon works in that situation. Plus, the other thing is that they never truly joined. They made that very clear in the episode, because if they did truly join, then the Dax symbiont couldn't leave Varad without Varad dying. But they did it before the joining took hold. That's why, as someone was complaining in the episode, God, what's that episode called? Facets? Where Dax does that whole ritual where she like brings out the previous host, and someone's complaining, how come it didn't do Varad? That's because Varad wasn't really a host, because he wasn't joined long enough for the joining to take hold, so he never was actually a host, because he was only a host for too short. Like the whole thing with Duran, he was apparently a host for several months, so he was joined long enough. Or I believe it was several months, at least. It might have been years, but I don't remember. But something like that. So he was definitely a symbiont long enough, but he was only a host for like several hours before the joining took hold, so he's not really a host, so I wouldn't expect to see him in that ritual thingy. I don't remember what it's called. But anyway, so I'm okay with it, is my main point. But yeah, I don't know, I guess I was going to say something else about Quark. Oh, you know what I was going to say? The whole thing with the one issue with this episode I do definitely have, and I've heard other people complain about, and 100% this is what I was thinking about of it when I first saw this episode. This episode is very poorly placed. Because there's the episode The Siege, where they have to evacuate the station, and they do these very long goodbyes, where Sisko and Jake say goodbye, and everyone says goodbye, and they draw it out, and they leave the station, everyone evacuates, but then they come back by the end of the episode. And then the very next episode is this episode, that begins with the station being evacuated. Not only that, like in The Siege, Quark stayed behind because he couldn't take his Latinum with him. Or that's part of Rom's his ticket or whatever, but really he's charting his Latinum around everywhere, so he didn't go with the evacuation, he was stuck on the station. In this episode, Quark stayed behind because he couldn't take his Latinum with him. And they had him back to back, and I'm like, Alright, if you're going to do the same type of storyline twice, the least you could do is spread the episodes out a bit. Like, save this one for towards the end of the season, or at the very least the middle. Don't have them back to back. It becomes repetitive. It felt like whiplash. I remember watching this for the first time when they just said it in the captain's log or commander's log that the station's been evacuated due to this plasma spawner. I was like, what? You just evacuated the station. Everyone come back. What are you talking about? This makes no sense. Not even, that's not even watching it, binging on a streaming service back to back. It's waiting a week and it still felt like we just did this. What are you doing? So yeah, that would probably be my biggest complaint on the episode. Anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters. I very much appreciate all the support I get. It does help me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neilhouse and Antarius. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. And then I'd also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migalacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Invasive Procedures, more like this lame shit is weak, sir. Yeah, I don't think that worked. Anyway, Evil Tuvok again. A good episode. I enjoyed it. It was a good, happy ending. I felt bad when Jadzia lost the symbiont, because then for a moment all we could say is, well, Dax isn't in Jadzia. Indeed. So next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, this is an interesting episode. We see the difference between a Trill without a symbiont and a Trill with the symbiont. It's like someone buying a new computer and transferring all saved files from the old computer to the new one, and for some reason wiping the new computer completely blank after a month, and you decide to use the old computer, so you transferred all the saved files back, including the saved files from the new computer. I wonder how much is 600 gold press latinum in real money. I like seeing Tim Russ as a Klingon. This is Megan Gallagher's first appearance in the Trek franchise. She would appear once more in Deep Space Nine and one in Voyager. Oh, I missed the Voyager. I didn't know which one that was. I'll have to look that one up. So my rating is 7, as Varad was Dax for maybe an hour or two. Was he the reason that Joran Borel was able to resurface in the episode Equilibrium? Fun fact, it is exactly 1 year between episodes on the 17th of October out of 10. I don't think Varad's the reason. I think that's completely unrelated. Although, I don't know. Maybe it could be related. Because it does seem to come out of nowhere. But I don't know. It happens a year later. As you say, 600 bars of gold pressed platinum is a lot of money. I would say, I don't know if I go as far as 1 million. Maybe like 100,000. I don't know. I can't give exact figures. But I know it's a hell of a lot of money. Because people talk about like 2 bars like it's a lot of money. It's not like it's like a couple $100. Maybe each bar is $100. Maybe it's like, But anyway, so it'd be what, $6,000 then if that was the case, or I don't know. I can't. Math sucks. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it's more than that. I think it might be more than that. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead. He says, I like this episode. It's a fun one. I remember having all the Playmate action figures for TNG and DS9 when I was a kid. The Jadzia figure came with a little plastic symbiont. I remember recreating this episode or variations of it a lot when I was playing with my figures. The symbiont gets kidnapped. John Glover is a great guest star as Varad. He and Cisco's interactions are good, although Cisco does get a little bit repetitive. Come with me to the infirmary and help Jadzia. I feel like he says that about 6 times. Early in the series, Quark tends to do more nefarious things and it just gets brushed off or laughed off. This is probably the worst example of that in my mind. Jadzia dies and the crew gets held hostage and it just gets laughed off. He does redeem himself somewhat by helping Odo get released, and it's a pretty funny scene when he's screaming in the infirmary and trying to get Bashir to play along. Despite these minor gripes, I do like this episode quite a bit. So I used to have those Playmade figures too. I think I remember the little symbiont that came with Jadzia. But yeah, I used to have all the TNG ones, all the DS9. I used to go collect them all. Some of them were hard to find. I remember Council of Troy is like the hardest one. I could never find it anywhere. It's before the internet, so I couldn't just order it online. I had to go to all the toy stores and look for it. Funny thing is, I was in this resort town over the summer, and I went to this shop that sold collectibles, and they had like all of those Star Trek Playmate figures, and they had like these big. They had this like big Jadzia and this big Odo doll, which I've never had before, and it was only like $10. So I was gonna get it, and I was like, I should really get this so I can put on my shelf. But I had been spending like way too much money on that trip, and I was like, no, I can't afford it. I need to stop spending money, and I really regretted it. I got like this pizza that sucked. That was over $10. I should have not gotten the pizza and got the fucking Odo toy instead. So I'm really disappointed. If I ever go back to that town, there's probably wouldn't be there anymore. I don't know if the store would probably only be open this summer during busy season, but anyway, if I go back there next year, if it's still there, then I'll get it. That's what I'll say. Anyway, yeah, I think what Quark did in which one? The Passenger, when he got all those people killed, I think that was worse than this. Because this time, at least, he redeemed himself a bit. And as I said, he didn't know what they were going to do. But the other time, he knew he was hiring mercenaries to go steal a ship who were armed and would probably kill a bunch of people. So I think that's much worse, personally. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius. He says, when I saw this episode was coming up, my first thought was, oh no, please, not a Trill episode. But this one was clearly better than expected, with some great character moments and good acting. The evacuation seems a little bit unnecessary since the skeleton crew has no problem running around the station, and there is no scene showing that the station has any technical problems because of the storm. Maybe a line would have helped that they receive some kind of medicine to mitigate the radiation or something like that. Also, I wonder how many people protested against the evacuation since the last one happened just one episode ago. But maybe they were all evacuated to some 5-star tropical resort on Bashir. I liked it how Quark saves the station in the end. The scene when he was picking the lock was great. It's a little bit funny that Kira says that Quark crossed the line this time, so he didn't cross the line in the first season when he committed an accessory to murder. My rating is a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think Quark did. Yeah, he saved the day. I'd buy that they let him off the hook because he totally saved their asses. Anyway, he showed bravery too by jumping on Tuvok Klingon like he could have been killed. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, the two issues I've always had with this episode was one, placement. Just in the previous episode, the station was evacuated. The second, of course, is while Quark did some bad things in season 1, this time Odo unequivocally had him at the end of the episode. Quark should have theoretically been behind a force field for the rest of the series, LOL. And like Odo would have cared, there should have been a scene of at the end where Sisko or maybe even Jadzia herself urges Odo not to press charges, but it needed to be there. We keep hearing after how Odo could not catch Quark. Right here, and no, I'm not going to accept a 4-season retcon where Odo reveals to Worf he uses Quark as a pawn to catch other criminals. Other than that, rather a compelling story and well acted. Maybe some naysayers are tired of a hostage-taking trope, but Jadzia's life was on the line, even in the long run, still just as compelling. Still, I'd clean up a little bit, up the script a little bit, and maybe not place this right after the Circle trilogy. I'll give it a 7.5. Shots Dax, the symbiont, thankfully was not directly from out of 10. That's actually a really good point about Quark, that they should have had a scene at the end where Jadzia was talking Quark and would talk Odo into not pressing charges, and talked him into letting him go. Maybe Bashir too, because Quark helped Bashir escape and they helped get Odo, and Bashir could be like, look, you would have been trapped in that thing and the Varad would have gotten away and Jadzia would have died if it wasn't for Quark. And Odo's like, oh, very well. Like, that would have been nice. A little something. A little acknowledgement. I will agree with that. So anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, I just realized what a strong beginning Season 2 had with the Circle trilogy and this one. I really like this episode. To me, it's very suspenseful, very engaging episode. I really like that Captain Sisko in the episode, especially the interaction with the Dax symbiont and the other Trill's body, and I really love the way he says in one scene, this friendship is now over. And another scene where he says, don't call me Benjamin. I mean, that was a badass line, and it wasn't cheesy like the other episodes in this season 1 were. Also, I really like how Quark was the reason that all this happened, and he is in the long run helped the crew out and reclaim DS9. So yeah, I really like this one, so my rating is 8 out of 10. P.S. I've never watched the show Farscape. I'm thinking of watching it. Would you recommend this show, and what do you think of the show? And what was the best season and the best episode in the show? So far, everything you said and reviewed, I'm totally in agreement with. Yeah, I know. You're probably the one that agrees with me the most on things. But as far as Farscape goes, it was fine. Like, I was thinking about maybe because I watched it, it's been like a couple decades, I think. It was like maybe around 2009, 2010, somewhere around there when I watched it. I only watched it once. I did binge it in order, but I didn't think it was that great. Like, some people, I think, hold it up on a higher pedestal than it deserves. I think the best season, if I'm remembering correctly, was season 3. I think it had 4 seasons, and the first season was kind of cheesy but okay. The second season got better. Season 3, I think, was the best season, and then season 4 just got too chaotic and out of control, and I can see why they canceled it. It's just they kept doing these crazy funky themed episodes where the dude was acting all crazy, and it just went over because they did it like once or twice in the earlier seasons, but then in season 4 they're like, let's do it every time, and it got out of hand. But I mean, it was fine, and also you could tell that they were just making shit up to try to make more threats. It's kind of similar. I think it would be similar in quality to Stargate. SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, but I think not as good. I don't think it's quite as good. It's definitely not as good as Babylon 5. If you haven't seen Babylon 5, I would say watch that instead. I think that's better. But, yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever. I wouldn't say it's a complete waste of time. But, yeah, I might rewatch it one of these days. I was thinking of doing that, but never got around to it. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, I feel this episode is not as strong as it should be. Again, Deep Space Nine is nearly empty. Sigh. I cannot believe how easy it is to incapacitate Odo and later release him. Had the command staff tried, they could have overcome the intruders, but no, the plot will not allow it. I enjoy the friendship between Sisko and Varad Dax, but why is Jadzia so helpless? Quark and the Klingon, played by Tim Russ, are both far too silly, and of course O'Brien must suffer. Five pissed-off station commanders shouting, "Don't call me Benjamin," out of 10. Now, I heard the opinion that the crew should have overpowered their captors, and they could have gotten away. I disagree. I actually heard the opinion that after, when they got in that huge fight, that when Sisko beat up the Klingon, but then Muriel put a phaser up to him, that he could have just knocked it out of her hand. But, like, no, she could have gotten a shot off before he was able to do that, and I think he didn't want to risk it. Like, she could have killed him right there. Yeah, they had phasers on them the whole time. I don't think they could have overpowered them. I kind of really disagree with that. But the one thing I will say that bothered me is when they had that fight scene where Sisko was fighting the Klingon and Kira was fighting Muriel, and Sisko beat up the Klingon, but Muriel beat up Kira. I think it should have been the other way around. Like, Sisko's great and all. I love Sisko, but kind of betting on the Klingon. He looked like a really badass, and he's a Klingon. And why the fuck didn't Kira beat up this Muriel person? Like, I know apparently it's supposed to say that she was like, must have had fight training or something, but Kira was a resistance fighter. She lived practically her whole life fighting, being a resistance fighter. So no fucking way should that, I don't care who this person is, she shouldn't have been able to fucking beat up Kira. No, and plus, I think they're implying that she was a prostitute. And so, yeah, she might have had to learn to be tough, but a prostitute, a former prostitute, should not be able to beat up Kira. I'm sorry. Because I don't know if she's a prostitute. That's just a guess. Because they were kind of vague, because she talked about how, I was living on the streets in Kefka 4, and I was working at an accommodation house, and I helped, Varad was a client, and I helped him relax. So what exactly is an accommodation house, and how did she help him relax? I don't know, she could have been a masseuse. Maybe my mind's just going to dirty places, but seemed to me they were implying that she was a sex worker, but I don't know. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That would be just fine. But she still shouldn't have been there. No way should she be able to beat up Kira. That's my only point. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Invasive Procedure out of 10 is going to be 8, extremely good. I think I might have given this episode a 9 in the past, and I was tempted to give it a 9 again, especially after talking about it. But you know what? When I watched it this time around, I wasn't as thrilled with it as I has been in the past. Like last time I watched it, I was like cheering, yeah. Well, this time I was like, wasn't as excited by it. Not saying I didn't like it. I definitely did like it. It definitely had a lot of fun. So I will say it's a very, very strong 8. Nearly a 9. I almost gave it a 9. But I am going to stick with a very, very strong 8. I'm, of course, on the camp of really liking this episode. It doesn't seem like the Patreon supporters were that split on it. It seemed like Brandon was the lowest, but everyone else was around a 7 or an 8 or something. So, yeah, so it seems we seem to mostly agree on this one. But yeah, everyone else seems to be very split on it, and some people I absolutely hate it. Where, yeah, I think it was a fun episode. I love Cisco in it. I think they had really good character interactions. I think it had high stakes, good tension. I mean, people make a good point about Quark. People make a good point about the Dax symbiont. But overall, yeah, I think the good outweighs the bad. I think it was definitely a highlight, especially all the guest actors. A highlight of season 2. As I said, season 2 has a strong finish, or strong start, strong finish, but in the middle, blah. But anyway, that is it for my review of Invasive Procedure. So if you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. Make a comment below. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Or you one of the people that disagree with me and totally hate it? Let me know. If you really want to support the channel, you can support me on Patreon. The link is in the description below. I have different tiers for different, different budgets, different people. I have different rewards, such as pre-releases, a Patreon-only series where I do exclusive videos on Patreon where I revisit reviews, and I request a video, make a comment on the video, stuff like that. But if you're unable to support me on Patreon, that's perfectly fine. Leaving a like, subscribe, all those things really help me out as well. So, let's see what's coming up next on my channel. Let's see where we're at. So, speaking of those Patreon-only videos, Wednesday I'll be over on Patreon to revisit my review for Phantasms. Excellent data episode. One of the best horror episodes in the entire show. Looking forward to watching this one again. And we'll be revisiting it over on Patreon. Thursday, of course, I'll be covering the newest episode of Lower Decks, Season 5, Episode 3. Saturday, back on my main channel to review Cardassians, the next DS9 episode. And then on Monday, another DS9 episode with Melora. And yeah, and that is what's coming up next on my channel. So be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Next Generation and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.